Welcome back to the conversation. Once again, I am your host, James Hamlin, and my words and thoughts are my own. They do not reflect any other person or entity, and if you want the full disclosure, go back and see the video of July 4th, 2018. I know that the installment this week is a little bit late, but I wanted to take advantage of the timing of it. Today, as you may or may not know, was the release of a new documentary called Death of a Nation. And full disclosure, I have not seen the movie, so my comments here in the first part of the program are based entirely on what I understand the movie is about from the synopsis and the critical reviews online. So take it with a grain of salt. Will I see the movie eventually? Probably. And can we go over it again then? Certainly. It probably will not be until that movie is available in the public library system because I do not feel like supporting its box office success or artificially inflating its numbers. But it is a good and a timely example that I want to take advantage of since the timing just works out that way. Um, as a Illinoisan born and bred, I have to say first off that the movie poster is a little bit um, questionable. Honest Abe Lincoln having his face juxtaposed with Donald Trump, I think the man's probably rolling over in his grave. I mean, Donald Trump as a president will be remembered for many things. Honesty, I don't think, is going to be one of them. But regardless, the point with this movie is it's a great example of the divisiveness and the what we've been talking about, the way partisan politics try and divide the country against itself. I mean, the entire tagline here is the notion that Abraham Lincoln once saved America from the Democrats, and now Donald Trump needs your help to do it again. Abraham Lincoln didn't save the country from the Democrats. Abraham Lincoln was not a president who was about dividing the nation. In point of fact, his entire purpose was to try and keep the Union together. This is just that same type of revisionist history, this type of spin that we see all over the place that's trying to take facts and turn them inside out to turn us against each other. And it's egregious. I think this is such a glowing example of how this plays out in the public eye. I just can't wait to see what the critical response to this is. But I think it also highlights a more critical issue. And I know we've talked before a bit about the crisis in culture and the crisis in character that our nation is facing. And this movie, I think, really highlights some of the change that's taken place in the last 200 years. Um, Obviously, today, most people think of politics as crooked, and you might think that crooked politicians go all the way back, but we have an example in Abraham Lincoln of a president who's remembered not for being crooked, but specifically for being honest. And when you think back to your grade school stories, Abe Lincoln, George Washington has the same thing. The early founding fathers, they were not looked at as people who were crooked and trying to cheat the public and trying to exercise law for their own ends and not. That notion comes much later. Um, and I would argue, and this is just my supposition again, take my opinion, you really start seeing the shift around World War II. That when we started trying to protect ourselves and protect our interests, and we started looking at the importance of deceiving people who might be inimical to America, and not just America. We see this all over the civilized world. The notions of loose lips sink ships, and the notion of putting out blackouts, sending out fake news stories, the entire drama with Magic and Ultra and the Enigma machines. It's all about the development of this complex web of deception to try and achieve victory that militarily might have been in much bigger question. But the outcome of this is that we kind of turned our culture almost on its head, and we displaced this value on truth and honesty and integrity, and we elevated the value of deceit and deception and misdirection. And that is still with us today. And we see it play out in arenas, especially in politics, but in lots of public arenas. There is this notion that the person who is sneaky, the person who is deceptive, the person who is tricky, the person who can get one over on you is in some sense superior to an honest person who's just going to be perceived as gullible, who's going to be taken advantage of, who's going to not end up in ahead. The whole notion that nice guys finish last. This is another example of this phenomenon. And when we live in a nation where we value deceit and we value deception, and we look at the people who practice those skills as superior, as role models, as examples of the best way that we can be, who are going to have the best outcomes, it's no surprise that we start seeing a political system that does the same thing, that we start seeing politicians who embrace that reality. And the issue isn't strictly with the politicians. The issue is a culture that has become adapted to this upside down way of thinking. And you know, if you look at individual people, obviously we all have our own morals, we have our own ethical codes, and certainly there are people out there who are honest. There are people out there who do tell the truth. There are people out there who value that sort of what character, which would now be considered old-fashioned by a lot of people. Um, but even I would argue that if you talk to these people, are they going to think of examples of people who they admire who are maybe a bit more deceptive or less honest? Are there going to be people who or situations where they view it as being the right thing to do? I think that value, that set of values that used to guide us, has become very shifted in the last 100 years, in the last 50, 60, 70 years, and we're still trying to adjust to that change. And I would think maybe we need to look at it very critically and say, is this really the type of nation that we want to be? Certainly with Donald Trump as president right now, our reputation for being upstanding, for keeping our word, for honesty and integrity is taking a beating. You know, whether or not you support his policies, personally, obviously, I'm not 100% behind the man. I think he is an example of an extreme politician who's pushing an agenda that may represent 2 to 5% of the population, but is really not in the best interest of the majority of the people of America. And I think uh, a lot of the support that he has is from trying to rabble rouse people against the far left, and trying to vilify and over exemplify, over exaggerate, exactly how bad things are under that regime. And he's very adept at it. He is very good at using his language to try and push a point, without relying on any kind of fact or consistency, but using the force of his personality. He has a very forceful personality, to try and push his point home. That's not the kind of man Abraham Lincoln was. That's not the kind of man Jordan. Yes, these men had strong personalities. Of course they did. Yes, these men had great presence, but they also had great character. They were people that American citizens looked up to. I mean, even during the Civil War, the nation is divided. People are tearing themselves apart. We've got issues on each side. This is the closest we've ever come to literally being divided against ourselves. We were literally divided for a period of years. But nobody on, okay, I can't say nobody, but if you read the writings from the Confederacy, they aren't looking at Lincoln as this insane man, and they don't agree with him, but no one's calling him dishonest. No one's calling him a liar. No one's calling him, power hungry. It's just a different way of viewing the world. You know, we didn't fight the Civil War. We didn't overcome the Civil War to have our nation be divided against itself. And the Southern generals were not cast out. The Southern government, um, you know, it was a period of reconstruction. It was a period of readjustment. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of residual resentment. There was a lot to overcome. But um, the nation didn't tear itself apart. The nation didn't allow itself to be destroyed. And both the North and the South to this day still have a lot of pride in their history and their um, heritage, and in the points of view that they had. But um, it's just so critical that we don't allow ourselves to take other people's word without checking it. Um, it's so critical that we test the truth of things. It used to be, you know, that we would regard a man's word as his bond. We would consider that if someone gave us a vow, someone gave us a spoken word, someone shook our hand, that was something that could be trusted, and that reality has shifted with this, along with this shift in perception from truth being the ideal to deception being the ideal. If we assume that everyone around us is trying to deceive us, then we can't take them at their word. We can't trust them. We can't rely on them. But you can't trust that everyone's going to be telling the truth when all of the information you're getting tells you the opposite is true. So there's a real struggle. There's a real dichotomy. So the challenge we face is to be the people who are honest and true, to be the people whose word is their bond, to be the people who are trustworthy in the face of other people who may not be that way. Because if we are that way first, society will tell us we're going to be taken advantage of. We're going to be the gullible ones. We're going to be the ones who are losing out at the end of the day. But if we have that position, if we can stand strong and say, I have been honest with you, I have told you the truth, I have presented you my thinking as clearly as I can, we have the right then to expect that of someone else and to encourage them to expect it of themselves. Transformation isn't going to come from a president in office making proclamations on the radio or over the internet or by Twitter. Transformation is going to come from people, from Americans coming together, from Americans standing up for what we believe in, from Americans reclaiming our heritage, reclaiming our values, reclaiming the essence of what it is to be American. We are not a nation of liars. We are not a nation of deceivers. We are a nation that was founded on virtue. We are a nation that was founded on making a more perfect form of government. We are a nation that was founded as a great experiment in trying to be better than any government system had been before, trying to look at all the mistakes that have been made in the past, make sure we don't make those same ones, and try something new. And like any experiment, things are going to work, things are not going to work. There's going to be places where we need to adjust, places we need to correct, places we need to stop and reflect and look at what the impact and results have been and say, is this the outcome we want to have, or do we need to tweak it? But the goal has always been to have a form of government that can be adaptable to the times, that can change with the people, and that can continue moving in a forward direction, that we can continue progressing, that we can continue developing, continue to grow, and not stagnate, not lock ourselves off, not shut ourselves down. That is the history of what it is to be American. And I think we should all be proud of being American and not feel ashamed that my views are not the same as your views, or I can't believe that you think that. I can't believe you would believe that. How can you be an American if you say America's bigger than us? And it is bigger than the Republicans, and it's bigger than the Democrats, and it's bigger than the Libertarians, and it's bigger than the Green Party. America is huge. America is all of us. And to try and take any part of America and say this is the only real America, everyone else is something different, something other, that they're not my country, that's somebody else, it weakens us. It takes what has been the greatest nation on this planet and makes it like everything else. I'm a scholar of classical history. I have a Latin major. People compare the fall of the Roman Empire and the fall of the British Empire. Is this the coming fall of the American Empire? Everything must fall apart. I don't know. I think we can do better than that. I think we don't need to go that route. But it does take effort. It does take people coming together. It does take competent leadership. It does take us putting into office the people who are going to lead from a position of character, who are going to lead from a position of virtue, who are not going to misdirect, misapprehend, who are not going to try and divide the nation against itself. And if you believe that, please come back. Let's continue this conversation. Let's talk some more. But it is so important, so critically important, that we don't just look at how can we reform the politics, how can we reform Washington, how can we reform ourselves? How can we get ourselves in a position that we can not only demand, but we can expect that the people we put in office are going to behave towards us the way we behave towards them? How can we empower ourselves to be the America that they are going to represent? And then how do we get ourselves get that representation? Please stay with me. I thank you for your time this week, and we'll see you again in 2 more weeks.